After 2 wild weeks, a final warning from ACT police. Today is the deadline for dispersal. Yesterday saw around 100 protesters breaching the perimeter around Parliament House as thousands of protesters descended on Federation Mall. There were 3 arrests and 1 hospitalisation. The convoy to Canberra has taken its cues from Canada, where today authorities began clearing the blockade at the busiest US border crossing. But what started as a protest against vaccine mandates for truckers has quickly become much bigger and more sinister.
A lot of these donors, we think, are coming out of the United States, certainly some of the radicalized groups that fund right-wing causes around the world.
Protesters further emboldened by an initially timid response.
One has to be very, very cautious before deploying military. It is not something that anyone should enter in lightly.
As the movement spreads worldwide, responses to copycat convoys have varied dramatically. In France, heavily armed police cracked down swiftly and violently overnight. But things were a little more chill over in New Zealand, authorities attempting a twin-pronged assault of sprinklers and irritating tunes, from Barry Manilow to Baby Shark. In Australia, the government's been sending out seriously mixed messages. Queensland Senator Gerard Rennick actually joining the protest, while the PM tried to deflect anger towards the states.
I understand their concerns about these issues. The other mandates that have been put in place by state governments, they are the governments that they should be raising those issues with.
This is a Prime Minister who set up the National Cabinet, who stood there and took credit for when the Premiers took measures. As soon as a group of protesters rocks into town critical of some of those decisions, he points the fingers at the Premiers, says it's not my fault, it's theirs. Why? He wants to harvest the second preferences of these protesters.
So, will this convoy continue to grow? And where is it headed next?
It's been really interesting watching this sort of spread around the world. I was reading some reporting on it in the United States, and there was some reporting that there were certain Facebook groups that were pushing for a similar thing to happen in the US as is happening in Canada and happening here. And Facebook itself actually admitted that some of this push was coming from what's called sort of troll farms, or these sort of deliberate concerted efforts to undermine kind of US democracy that existed in places like Vietnam, Bangladesh, Romania. So it's sort of foreign interference kind of meddling with the American population and sowing discord. And they know it's happening.
But I think the concerns of a lot of the people that are turning up are quite real, right? Like, they're people that are genuinely distressed about borders being closed, having to vaccinate their kids. I mean, that was the thing that I think threw me a little bit going there the other week, was that, you know, there's obviously this collection of people that feel because of the pandemic or because of the policies during the pandemic that they've kind of somehow ended up on the other side of the community, as it were, of their families, of their businesses, and they're genuinely upset and angry. I think that's the component that we can't ignore.
Yeah, and that's why I'd say that is such fertile ground for any kind of potential foreign interference. You know, it's fertile ground for it.